Should you play Starfield? It's a simple question with polarizing answers depending on which camp you fall into. We're going to be analyzing this from the perspective of the game was flawed when it launched, but still a fun game at its core. And over the last 8 months or so, they have continually made quality of life improvements to it. Most importantly, the May 15th update, which added all of the survival options, the control assist, the aim assist on the controller, the 60 frame mode for the Xbox, and just a whole bunch of other stuff in terms of making the game better and adding a bunch of stuff to it. Now, the game was very good when it came out, but it did have a lot of problems. Most notably was the fact that it was locked to 30 frames on consoles, and things like the food and drink weren't that big of a deal. Like they were kind of pointless in the launch game. And now with the survival options where you can actually have food, be malnourished and dehydrated, and have pros and cons depending on whether or not you've eaten food or drink. Like those are things that have significantly changed how the base game plays. And I know for me personally, because I do play on the Xbox, having aim assist that was a game changer for me. Like I've talked about this publicly in some of my past videos. Like I did not like the gunplay in the launch game. I did love ship combat. I did 350 hours in my first playthrough, and almost I would say probably 300 of those hours was me just in my ship going and exploring the galaxy and going to planets and running missions and playing space trucker and shooting pirates out of the sky and doing different, buying different ships and just having a fleet of my own ships. It was a lot of fun. But there's a lot going on here, so I kind of want to dig into pros and cons, because there are cons to the game for sure. There are still some things that I recognize are legitimate criticisms. Some of that would be what we consider to be Bethesda jank. And if you're someone who doesn't like jank in your games, then this probably isn't going to be something that you're going to be jumping all over. Um, but overall, it's a good game that has become a much better game, and I would argue it has become a great game. And there are still further changes coming on the pipeline with land vehicles coming later in 2024, and of course the Shattered Space DLC that's set to launch this fall. So, should you play it? Um, if you like Bethesda games, I would say that that answer is an easy yes, because if you've ever played, whether it's an Elder Scrolls game or a Fallout game, then you know how Bethesda does their games. You've got your core RPG where you've got like your standard quests, right? You've got your Mage Guild, your Thieves Guild. If you remember those from the Elder Scrolls games, or if you go into the Fallout universe and you've got, all these faction quests, it's the same thing here. You've got your Constellation quest, which is the main faction. Then you've got like the Freestar Rangers, the Region Industries, the UC Vanguard, the UC Sysdef, the Crimson Fleet. These are all faction storylines that have content that ranges from a few hours in length up to around 20 hours in length, depending on which quest line you're working on. Um, so there's your traditional standard RPG fare where you have the faction quest line and you follow that linear quest. It's going to take you to lots of different planets. You're probably going to get some sort of a space suit out of it, as well as some special weapons. And generally speaking, many of those quest lines will give you some type of a ship as well. So there's a reason to do those above and beyond just the storyline, because you're going to get gear out of those. But then there's also what are the mission quests, which are like these side activities, and you can find these mission terminals, and they do all sorts of random things, and they are truly random. And there's ones that are tied to factions and ones that are just random. But it's things like deliver these goods, whether it's potatoes or some sort of transportation where you play space trucker, and you're going to need a ship that has the cargo space to do that. And so you can go play space trucker and become, the Han Solo of the world, and take legitimate goods and also smuggled goods from point A to point B. On the mission boards, you'll also find things like outpost quests, which are tied to the outpost production. So you need to actually build a production facility to create some type of resource and then deliver that resource to a place. There's also passenger transport, and in order to do passenger transport, you're going to need a vehicle that is capable of transporting passengers, which is different than a ship that can carry cargo. And so you'll end up having different ships. You might have a sort of run-of-the-mill ship in the beginning that can do a little bit of both, but as you get deeper into those mission boards, you'll find yourself needing to specialize those ships a little bit more based on what you want to be doing. And then there's also things like go kill these pirates on X place, and or go fight space pirates in your ship, in which case you're going to need a ship that's rigged for combat. Um, Now, here's where there's one of the areas where I will say there is still some conversation about things that could get better. So when the game launched, they touted 1,000 planets. There are 1,000 planets in this game. However, the way these planets are done is that they are, as a general rule, many of them have static points of interest, especially if you're looking at the named planets where you have major quests and faction quests related. A lot of them that are off the beaten path are procedurally generated. So the planet is there, it always has the same name, but they basically have a series of templates that when you arrive on the planet, it will kind of mix and match those templates and it will spawn random points of interest, random biomes, and so on and so forth, random harvesting nodes and things of that nature for you to explore. And you can go to these planets, you can set up outposts, everything else. But one of the things that is easy to critique is that when you start doing some of the kill quests that I mentioned from the mission boards, where you go off and like kill a pirate leader somewhere, you'll quickly notice that you're going to be going into these similar types of bases on different planets. It's sort of like this carbon copy that's been plopped down in different places. And it's not so noticeable when you've only done a handful of them, but when you start to do more than just a handful of these quests, you start to see more of those because the templates are limited. And so there's a certain amount of repetition that will begin to happen. And that's a legitimate concern. But what's interesting to me is I don't see anybody making the same complaints about Mass Effect. But I think a lot of people have forgotten that Mass Effect, despite what an amazing game Mass Effect was one of the worst offenders when it came to copy paste interiors. It was so bad. Like if you haven't played, like go back and play like the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which came out a few years ago. I remember when I did that, I had forgotten all about how bad the repetitive nature of some of those like outposts were. They just plop down these few rooms and you go in and it's like, oh wow, this is exactly the same as the last 15 I've done. Um, when you start getting into a game like this where it's really really big and there's lots of stuff going on and they're using some sort of procedural generation, you're going to come across repetitive stuff like that. If you get bothered by that, that is a critique that is probably going to come up and you just need to be aware of that before going in. But understand that those are optional side missions that you don't have to do if you don't want to. It's just sort of these things that you can go do in between other stuff if you want to do filler content. The other thing to consider is that there are literally hundreds of activities to do. You'll be wandering around a city and you'll just start hearing people talking and you'll pop up activities which turn into these like little side quests that you can go do. And these are, what I would call fetch quests. There's a lot of, go help this person with the mob boss, or they need something delivered, or they're having problems with this NPC, or they need to negotiate with this person, or you have to solve a murder. Those can get a little bit repetitive when you do them long term, but there are a lot of them to do. There's also shipbuilding, which the shipbuilding is pretty robust. You can obviously just buy your ships if you want to. You can also steal ships. You can take over ships in space or on planets, so you can take other people's ships and do what you want with them. But then you can also go into the shipbuilder, and especially now with the May 15th update, you can actually go in and you can use modules now that have empty habitats where previously when you were building ships, they have predetermined layouts for like where are the couches and the desks and the beds and the things, but now there's empty habitats that you can build ships with, and they have a ship decorator mode that came with the May 15th update, which allows you to go in and customize 100% of the interiors exactly how you want, as well as the exteriors. You do have to understand that you're working with modules, so there are a limited amount of modules. There's a lot of them. There are hundreds of them, so it takes a long time before you start running into repetitiveness. But the shipbuilding is extremely robust. It's not unlimited, so that's something you have to consider when you're actually going in and building your ships. And on top of that, you also have outpost building, which means you can go out and build outposts in wherever you want on any of these planets. And those outposts can be just something simple where it's a place that you build as your home and you can decorate it as you see fit. But you could also build production facilities and you can become a mining outpost, or you could become, a crop farming, an agriculture outpost. There's lots of different outposts that you can build. Quick commercial break, everyone, to celebrate and give thanks to all of these amazing people who keep me on the air full time. Really appreciate the support. All you got to do is join as a member. You get access to private videos. You can also do super thanks on any upload or super chats and stickers on any live stream or premiere you see. And beyond that, don't forget we're multi-streaming over on Twitch now, so you can support over there as well. Thanks so much to everybody. Let's get back to the video at hand. There's lots of different things you can do, and that's a very complex thing where you need generators and power and all these different things to run the different modules. But then you can set up outposts on different planets and automate it all, and you can become, I don't know, a nickel baron or an iron baron and become rich off of mining. So there's a lot of activities that you can do beyond just the base quest. There's questing, obviously, but then there's the missions, there's the activities, there's flying around and doing space combat, there's taking out bandits, there's doing outposts, there's building your own ships, stealing other ships, taking over ships. One of the things I like to do is just as I'm exploring different planets, you'll be out wandering from one place to another and you'll see a ship landing somewhere and you just head in that direction. And generally speaking, you'll find ships that you can take over because they've landed and the NPCs have gone off and done something, or they're there defending the ship and you take care of them and now you've got a free ship you can do what you want with. It's a lot of different things. So for me, Starfield has sort of provided me with that sci-fi RPG in the Bethesda style, which is something I like. It's not No Man's Sky. It's not Elite Dangerous. It's not Star Citizen. It doesn't need to be. Those games do their own thing in their own style, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you like No Man's Sky, go play No Man's Sky. If you like the way Elite Dangerous does it, go play Elite Dangerous. If you like the way Star Citizen and Squadron 42 do it, do that. Bethesda has built their version. I mean, some people call it Skyrim in space, some people call it Fallout in space. It is a generally fun experience. The jank is there, and the jank is some of the things like the party NPC. Your companion NPCs can be a little annoying at times when they're talking to you. They call it the NPC bark. Sometimes people will stare at you with like dead eyes as you're wandering by, and it's just kind of weird how when you're wandering through a place, like everybody's just like staring at you, like they're not just going on about their own business, and that can feel a little disconcerting and a little unnatural. But that's just the way Bethesda has done their games, and that's the way they've at least done them up to this point. So it's just something you recognize as you go through and play. So when it comes down to it, I always tell people, should you play it? I do think you should if you like good RPGs. Like it's a rich, deep RPG with a lot of different things. The planets are vast. There's a lot to explore. There are obviously still things that are in the works. Like land vehicles are going to be another game changer when those come, because right now when you're exploring planets it's with your boost pack. And so that can feel a little, after you've done it a few times, it's like you're playing leapfrog on planets, and that can be a little repetitive. But I think that once we get land vehicles, much like with Mass Effect, you'll be able to drive around the planets. It's going to open those planets up a little bit more and help people enjoy those a little bit more. And that's one of the things I love about the fact that they have 1,000 planets, is that as Bethesda continues to add DLC and content to the game, and more importantly, once the modders get their hands on things later in 2024, you're going to see these thousands planets become a massive playground with sort of an unlimited potential for additional content to be added to the game. So in my mind, it's worth it. There's hundreds of hours of gameplay in this game if you want to explore everything that's available in terms of all the different quest lines, or if you just want to sit down and play the main quest line, it's like 20 hours of content, So there's just depends on what you want to do. So in my mind, it is worth it. I've had a lot of fun playing with it. We did our original playthrough at the end of 2023. We are, I would say, probably 3/4 of the way through our second playthrough right now as we're getting through the May 15th update. We're having a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll see you in one of the live streams. They happen daily here and on Twitch. There's a Discord, a Patreon, and I'll see everybody in the next one. Stay safe. Happy gaming.